Good morning, Highlands, Presbyterian. Today we are in Mark 2, picking up in verse 23. One Sabbath, Jesus was going through the grain fields, and as they made their way, his disciples began to pluck heads of grain. And the Pharisees were saying to him, "Look, why are they doing what is not lawful on the Sabbath?" And he said to them, "Have you never read what David did when he was in need and he was hungry, he and those who were with him? How he entered the house of God in the time of Abiathar the high priest, and ate the bread of the presence, which it is not lawful for any but the priests to eat, and also gave it to those who were with him. And he said to them, The Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath." This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Well, I made a promise to myself that I wouldn't talk about the Cincinnati Bengals for the entire sermon, but I have to start off by mentioning them, right? I'll note that they have never lost in a conference championship game. Right? The last time they played in one was 1988 when I was 7 years old, but as far as I'm concerned, they're on a 2-game winning streak in the conference championship, and I fully expect that to continue next weekend. It's been a fun ride, but I'm not ready to be done with it yet. What I've noticed is that they've already started advertising for 2022 season tickets, right? Trying to take advantage of the momentum. And they're doing something clever, right? They're showing highlights from their first round playoff win, right? I mean, they haven't had one in 31 years, so you got to capitalize on it. But they're making you think back to this incredibly happy memory. And then when you think of the upcoming season, you're looking through the lens of that memory, and so you then have the expectation that the upcoming season will contain many more happy memories, right? The hope is that you have this mind full of happy memories as you pull out your credit card and type in the numbers in the appropriate box and hand over your money full of expectations of future joy. Right? During those commercials, you're thinking of prior joy, which is leading to the expectation of future joy. Right? It's not only the Bengals who do this, right? Which is good, because otherwise the last 31 years would have been pretty rough. Rachel and I recently went to Florida, and we were out at dinner, and we sat down and we reminisced about other trips that we've had the opportunity to take. And we had all these great memories, and what they did is said, hey, that in combination with this great trip we're on now helps us look forward to the future with expectations of future joy. Right? And it's similar to what happens on Valentine's Day. And men, this is your reminder that Valentine's Day is in like 3 weeks. So if you go out for a nice dinner, right, when you go out, you spend time thinking about happy memories from the past. You talk about happy experiences that you've had in the past. And as you enjoy that dinner, you have these memories, you have what you're enjoying in the present, and then you look forward to future joy, the expectation of future joy. Right? It's a moment you're standing in the middle and you're looking back, which is helping you look forward with hope. Right? You think about where all things are going. Right? And all of this relates to the Sabbath. Right? And so the Sabbath has roots in creation itself. Over the first 6 days of creation, God creates the sun and the sky and the earth and the planets and the animals and the trees. And finally, on the 6th day, God creates Adam and Eve in God's own image, setting them down in the Garden of Eden to live in communion with God, walking with God in the coolness of the evening. And so after God creates them, the next day is this day of rest, where God rests from the labors of creation, savoring the goodness that has been made. And so isn't it interesting that Adam and Eve begin their existence on a day of Sabbath rest, right? That's their first full day, this day of wholeness where nothing is lacking because God has made everything and God has declared everything good. On the first day of existence after God has completed creation, there's peace, there's Sabbath, there's wholeness. Right? And we know the story from here, right? They don't stay in that Sabbath moment, but instead they reach for heaven to hold in their own hands, but instead it slips through their fingers like sand through the hourglass, and sin separates us from our Creator. The wholeness that was present in the beginning is lost, but the memory remains within us. That's why when we read the news when we go about our lives, there's something inside of us that tells us that things are not the way they ought to be, right? It's why we look around and we say that some things are wrong, that we weren't made for chaos and instability and this constant, unceasing hurry. Because where we were created for Sabbath rest, for wholeness that is dependent on God, for peace that passes anything this world can give us. We were created for Sabbath. And we've broken that, and we've been searching for it ever since. And so when God gives Moses the Ten Commandments, they're separated into two parts. And the first three direct how we relate to God. And 5 through 10 direct how we relate to one another. And right there in the middle of these two sections is the fourth commandment, which tells us how to honor the Sabbath and keep it holy. And it teaches us how to relate to God and how to relate to one another. Because we're not to do any work, and we're also to be sure that our servants don't do any work, and we're also to be sure that our animals don't do any work, is what the commandment says. For because God rested on the seventh day of creation, we too are to rest every seventh day as a reminder of what God has done. Now in this age, right, we don't have servants, we don't have, we may not have animals. We don't have any in our house. But it says it's how we relate to one another, to give one another the opportunity to rest, as we seize the opportunity to rest. All right, and it's important that we remember what the Sabbath is all about. The Sabbath is about what God has done. By not working on the Sabbath, we're reminded that it's not our work that sustains creation. By resting on the Sabbath, we're reminded that God sustains creation, that God will bring about the fullness of redemption in God's time. It's not our work that does that, but it is God's work that does that. And as humans are inclined to do, we took this beautiful commandment and twisted it around so that perhaps one of the lingering reminders of Sabbath is, in these days, is that you can't buy beer in many states until noon. But our rulemaking didn't start there, right? The Pharisees had this entire complex rule about keeping the Sabbath. And they were legalistic about what was considered work and what wasn't. You could walk 999 steps, but 1,000 steps was considered too far. There were rules about looking in a mirror fixed to a wall or killing lice on the Sabbath. Right? Apparently, the tradition continues that some have resisted having their temperatures taken when they go into the hospital on the Sabbath. For the taking of temperatures, even when done automatically, is considered work by some. Right? And it's this rule-focused mentality that brings Jesus into conflict here with the Pharisees. The disciples are walking through a field, and they're plucking heads of grain, presumably because they're hungry. But the Pharisees have this fixed mindset where they're eager to trap Jesus in violation of the Sabbath law. And Jesus reprimands the Pharisees, reminding them of a time in the Old Testament when David and his men ate holy bread from the temple. Not because they were sacrilegious, but because they were hungry. And Jesus says you don't need to suffer with hunger when there is bread to be shared. In the same way, Sabbath is not a time to deprive yourself, but a time to relax, to rest in what God is doing, to enjoy the plenty and the bounty that God has surrounded us with. The Sabbath is made for us, Jesus tells us. It is a gift. It reminds us of what God does for us, and it looks forward to the things that God will do. It reminds me a little of, I was thinking of Christmas cards when I was reading this. We were taking down our Christmas card display, and I admit I enjoy looking at them, right? When I see them from friends and family, they bring back great memories. And then I look forward to when I will see people again, right? The memories, the anticipation, it's a gift, and it makes me pause and appreciate the relationships I'm blessed with in my life. Christmas cards make me slow down and think, and that's what Jesus is trying to get at, that the Sabbath is a time to rest and to enjoy. And it's certainly an outdated notion in our modern day and age, right? Society has moved on from the idea of the Sabbath, instead just seeing it as another opportunity to get things done. There are groceries to be bought and soccer games to be played and 1,000 other things that need to be done. All of them important, right? The rest of the week spills over into Sunday, and we're running out of time, often because we're trying to build our own kingdoms that we feel the desperate need to build. And so we grab time instead of Sabbath because it's available. And we don't feel like we're losing much because our current needs are so urgent and so pressing. And so we think, why celebrate the Sabbath? The Sabbath is meant to be a time in the week where we stop and take a deep breath and we give thanks for what God has done. It's when we slow down and look around and realize that this is all a gift, an unearned blessing, and we are to be grateful for it. The Sabbath is a weekly reminder that it is God who made the world, and when we rest from our labors, God's work carries on. When you slow down on the Sabbath, you remember that you don't need to do it all. That pressure is off of you. The world is a gift sustained and redeemed by God. Sabbath helps us lift our head often from all of the false gods that we're busy worshiping and see the amazing things that God is doing. Sabbath is a reminder to you of what once was, long before you took your first breath, but you were made for it, and the aching in your soul is a part of you crying out for what once was lost. It's not only a looking back, though, right? It's a looking forward as well, because Sabbath is a promise of what one day shall be yet again. Sabbath is a weekly reminder that we were made for more than chaos and busyness, and that one day we shall be present, fully present in the fullness of God's presence. And when we rest in fullness from our labors, the work our God has done will carry us into the fullness of Sabbath rest, where we can say that the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want, because all of our needs are satisfied in the Lord. This is what Paul is getting at in that Colossians reading that we hear today. It is in Jesus that all things hold together. It is in Jesus that the fullness of God dwells, and because of that, Jesus is able to reconcile all things, including you, to himself, making peace by his blood on the cross. That is why the command of the Sabbath in Exodus was for everyone, because Jesus came to redeem everyone and everything. We're all moving towards this reality, and so we should practice for it, right? So we're ready when we get there. So I invite you to practice the Sabbath. Find time every week to stop and to rest, to remember that the world is God's creation, and you are not responsible for sustaining it. Bask in the reality that God creates, that God sustains, that God redeems. Rest. Slow yourself down in a spirit of worship with relaxation and awe, directing your energy and your focus towards God, grateful for what has been done for you. The Sabbath is a gift for you, to you, intended to remind you of what once was, and to help you look forward to the future with expectant joy as to what God will one day restore.